With me today is Aaron Chang. He's the Vice President of Oil and Gas Marketing for Continental Resources. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. Congratulations on this well-deserved honor. Really, I'd like to start off by asking you how you got your start in the oil and gas industry.
Sure. So I'm second generation oil and gas. My father was in oil and gas his whole career. It's funny though, right? He was in the industry, and I knew he was in oil and gas, but I didn't really understand or know what he did. So to that end, it wasn't a huge passion of mine, you could say, going into college. I had always planned on going to medical school. And so, entering undergrad, I thought it would be good to get a strong sort of, fallback plan or a good technical background that I could always fall back on, and really played into sort of my strengths in math and science. And so I went into chemical engineering at Oklahoma State University. That being said, Oklahoma State is very much sort of in oil and gas country, and so a lot of that program is geared towards process engineering in oil and gas type facilities. So my sophomore year, I was very fortunate to land an internship here in rural Oklahoma, and just working at this sour gas facility with all of the people and just the pride that they had and the patriotism that it was very infectious, right? It almost feels like a community, and anyone that's in oil and gas, I think, understands what I'm talking about. And it was very impressionable as a 19, 20-year-old kid. That was something that really stuck with me. So a couple years later, I did a few more internships, and it came time to graduate. And my options were start a career and begin making money, or spend 6 more years in school or in residency. And so the decision was actually pretty easy at that point.
That's a great story, though. You talked about, of course, making that decision. So once you started professionally working, can you talk a little bit more about getting to the place that you are now, really in this position and at such a relatively young age as well?
Yeah, sure. So, like I mentioned, I have a technical background. I started my career as an engineer, facilities engineer, and spent the first couple of years working pipeline and facility projects, which I think created a really good operational background and foundation for me. But, as I progressed, and, I'm a very social person, so I started working with more people, and eventually there were some opportunities in the business development space and the commercial space that uh, I had a chance to work on, and it was something that I was passionate about. So I transitioned out of sort of the more technical engineering type roles and into asset and project management, and eventually more into the commercial side. And now I'm here in marketing, and I think it's just a continuation of that sort of people aspect, and living in a very dynamic world that is something that I think it changes on a daily and weekly basis, and it's very engaging, and it's challenging, but it's work that I find a lot of fulfillment in. So.
That's great to hear. And really, with knowing that and thinking about when you were in college, maybe I should get a technical background. Can you take all of that, and do you have any advice for the younger generation, maybe that are in college or trying to find their place in the industry as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess there's a couple things I would say. The first and foremost, I'd advise anyone, for that matter, young or old, to find a good mentor. It's something that I kind of started later in my career, and I guess I could say, my dad's always been a strong mentor and role model in my life, but really finding that person in the industry that has similar passions and is in a position or a career trajectory that you really kind of view yourself being in at some point, and finding someone that's really willing to commit time and resources to develop you. And I've done this for years, and I find that there's a certain group of mentorship where it's getting together for lunch every 3 to 4 weeks and just kind of shooting the breeze. And that's great too, but I'm talking, real, uh, you know, detailed depth, conversations where there's a component of truth telling and a component of, feeling invested in each other. And that has had such a major impact and influence on my development as a person, as a professional. And I would encourage all young people to find a strong mentor early. Second to that, and I think it's sort of tied to it, but it's leadership, and it's understanding that everybody is a leader in some form or fashion, and everybody has the ability to have influence, whether that's in their communities or at school or at work with their families. And I think, generally speaking, you look across the world today, and I think we have a little bit of a leadership gap, and there's a shortage of good leaders. And so I think what I'd encourage the younger generation to do is really focus and be intentional on their development as leaders, regardless of the profession that they go in or industry that they go into.
Great advice there. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Can you talk a little bit about maybe a challenge or a risk that you faced, that you navigated through, that you may find it has helped shape you as well in your career?
Yeah, that's a fun one. There's a project or a couple projects I'll never forget, but it was pretty early on in my career. I was working sort of the West Texas, Permian, Delaware Basin, Midland Basins, and it was around Christmas time, and it was late one night, and we got a call from one of our largest producers on one of our systems, and very important producer, and they told us that they had some commercial agreements that were expiring that had sort of fallen through the cracks. And long story short, we were delivering into a bunch of rich gas processing headers, and they told us we needed to make 6 new interconnects in a matter of 3 to 6 months. And as a young engineer, it felt overwhelming, right? The scope wasn't that big. It was 2 to 6 miles of various sizes of pipe. So, not an impossible task, but as a young engineer, it felt like an overwhelming task. And I remember the first thing I was doing was coming up with all the reasons it couldn't be done, right? There was no survey, there were landowner issues, we were at a material shortage, whatever it was. I was just giving all the reasons why we couldn't do it, right? So we got off the phone call, and I remember my boss called me. I'll never forget it. He called me and he said, Aaron, I think what you need to understand is we're a can-do team, and we work in a service industry, and we're going to find a way to make it happen. And it really sort of changed my perspective and my approach to problem solving and how I think about challenges, and really viewing them more as opportunities. And it's stuck with me ever since, and it's something I'll never forget. But just having that can-do attitude and really changing your perspective on being a world changer and sort of anything is possible, which I think is a big part of the reason that Continental is such an attractive place to work, is, you work for a visionary like Harold Hamm. That's very much embraces who he is, and he's very passionate, and he's very persistent, and he says it multiple times a week, and he means it. And we're going to go change the world, and we've got a can-do attitude at Continental. So,
That's great to hear. And really, I wanted to ask you about the year that 2020's been. Is there anything you want us to know or share with us about Continental Resources as everyone's looking forward to moving into 2021 as well?
yeah, I think it's easy to focus, kind of playing off what I just said. I think it's really easy to focus on all the negatives, but there's also a lot of positive things taking place in the industry right now, and I think this is Harold and Bill have mentioned it in our earnings calls, but these are times when Continental strives, where we find new opportunities, we find ways to improve, we find new efficiencies, and I think we're going to do it again. We're going to come out stronger as a company when we get through this on the other side. So.
Great to hear that. My final question for you can be the million-dollar question for many. Do you have any tips on work-home life balance, Aaron?
Yeah, that question has a whole new meaning in 2020, doesn't it?
So
But
true.
yeah, it's hard, right? It's really hard. I think my dad from a young age, he's talked about the importance of family, right? And it's always been an important a priority to him. And as he's getting towards the end of his career, and my mentor's getting towards the end of his career, it's something they're always stressing, is make sure you understand what's most important in your life and put that first. I don't think, and I've never met anybody, regardless of the roles that they were in, that looked back on their career and said they wish they spent more time at work or had done one more deal or did one more project. And I think it comes down to being intentional with your time, really making sure that you're allocating your time to what's important to you. And at the end of the day, for me, if I fail as a father and a husband to my kids and my wife, and I succeed at work, then I didn't do it right at the end of the day. So making sure that I always have that perspective, I think, is really what grounds me. And then my wife, of course, Kelly, she's always there to make sure that I'm maintaining the balance that I need. And she also really understands how passionate I am about my career, and she's always been very supportive. But, having a good wife and a good mother to our kids is certainly a driver to that success and work life balance.
Thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed it today, Aaron. We appreciate your insight as well as your expertise, and congratulations on this honor. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was good to be with you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.